Hello again, you're watching the Burley Show, talking to Generation Y in the form of Tom Harwood and Phoebe Potter about what they think the face of politics is looking like just at the moment. We've been talking about Brexit in some detail before the break. I want to talk to you about whether what's happened since 2016 and the referendum has been feeding polarisation in the country, to the extent, Phoebe, where, you know, we did have, you know, the smallest of margins, really, for leaving the European Union, and we find ourselves, he does that frowning a lot. Your turn in a minute. Ladies first, what do you think?
Absolutely, and I think it's definitely a problem that is definitely highly exacerbated by the internet. I think it can often, I think there is serious division, but I think there are very, very loud, on either side, definitely on both sides, minority of people who are being extremely divisive in a way that is not helpful for the country. I can tell you that at Our Future, Our Choice, we are travelling around the country all the time, meeting young people, and whoever we meet, we're able to have very civil conversations with, whether we disagree with them or not. And I do think that is the will of most of the country, although it definitely has caused serious divisions. But I don't think those who shout the loudest at either end of the spectrum should claim to speak for the whole country, which they certainly don't.
Tom?
I totally agree with that. I mean, there are absolute nutters who stand outside College Green, outside Parliament, and shout at TV cameras, and they come both from the Leave side and the Remain side, and they both don't really help the debate or move anything forward or contribute in any way. I did frown at that suggestion that it was a really slim margin, though. It was over 1 million votes. It was the largest vote. More people voted to leave the EU in this country than have ever voted for anything before, any person, any party, any cause in the history of this country. 17.4 million people is not a mandate to be sniffed at. And
yeah. No one's sniffing, and as a result, we're leaving.
Well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, Phoebe might disagree, but I do think that there's a certain amount more confidence now in terms of that we are actually going to leave. We finally have this government sitting in number 10 that we really should have had in 2016. I think everyone on a lot of sides of this debate can really see it's good that Brexiteers can own this project. It would have been better if Brexiteers could have owned it for the last 3 years.
But you accept that Brexit has divided the country like no other topic?
I don't know.
Give me another example.
I think this sort of idea that Britain was a land of milk and honey before 2016 is a bit rose-tinted. I mean, there were riots on the streets of London not so long ago. When the Conservatives won a majority in 2015, there was big unrest, there were big protests from the minority of people that didn't vote for them. I mean, there's always been a certain degree of political tension. And I think it's not just Brexit, because if we look at the way that the world was moving, Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party. Gosh, that's a bit of a yeah.
That
Jeremy
would be a story.
Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party long before Brexit happened, and that's also a sort of sign of the time that we're living in, with a very mobile sort of politics that we're seeing now. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's all resting on the cause of leaving the European Union. I think actually we'd be a lot healthier of a society if we'd have left a little while ago, and if there hadn't been sort of this challenging of a democratic mandate. I can't remember a time in British politics where a legitimate election result was sort of challenged and said, OK, you won, but we shouldn't implement it anyway.
Let me put this to you. I'm just reading a YouGov poll, I think just out today, that said that most members of the public feel that politicians should do their bidding, whereas most politicians think that 80% of them think that it's up to them and they should have free will within Parliament. To that end, what do you think should happen as far as a general election is concerned?
I think a general election is inevitable. I think one certainly won't be happening until we leave the European Union. But if we look at any of the times that we've had minority government, and the most pertinent example would really be at the end of the 1970s. Huge chaos, wafer-thin parliamentary votes. That's the sort of stuff that comes as a result of a parliamentary crisis, rather than any particular issue that's being pursued. Yeah, and there was huge unrest and disarray and a massive defeat for the Conservative Party in '97. So I think really an election is inevitable.
This year?
Simply, I don't know. Either at the start of next year or at the end of this year. I'm not one to say. I think the one thing that it's pretty safe to say is it won't be before the end of October, but it's necessary. I don't think you can govern with a majority of just 1 or 3 MPs. You need to be able to put forward a domestic agenda.
OK.
I mean, I certainly agree that I don't think you can govern with such a small majority, and I think that is such an argument for why Boris Johnson, pursuing one of the biggest choices that is set before the country, needs to have a democratic mandate before he pursues a no deal.
It did have rather a large democratic mandate back in 2016 and 2017.
There is no... Well, actually, majority of people voted for parties who explicitly ruled out no deal in 2017. So you cannot claim there's a democratic mandate for no deal.
Most people voted for parties that said they were committed to implementing the result of the referendum.
OK, we're almost out of time, guys, but just to go back to my original point, should politicians be representing themselves or representing their constituencies? Really quickly.
They should always be thinking about their constituents. There's always a bit of both in terms of conscience issues, and it's never a clear-cut thing, but absolutely always thinking about the interests of constituents.
Indeed, they should always be acting in the best interests of their constituents and certainly not just going with the do-or-die approach which Boris Johnson is really trying to push forward.
It's been fascinating to hear from both of you. Come back soon, please. Let's do this again. Thank you
very much.
Thanks a lot. I want to take you to Hong Kong coming up in just a few moments' time. The police have moved in on the terminal there. They've got bored. They really want these protesters out of there. What is going to happen next? It's a tinderbox in Hong Kong. We're going to be there for you live in just a few moments' time. Do stay tuned.